Route 112 cuts a lonely path through the dense, unforgiving timberland of the White Mountains. On a moonless winter night, the asphalt winds like a black ribbon past weathered barns and silent pines, offering no refuge from the biting cold. At a sharp bend near the small village of Woodsville, New Hampshire, the profound silence of the forest was shattered by the violent crunch of metal against a frozen snowbank. It was the evening of February 9th, 2004. The disabled vehicle sat angled against the eastbound lane, its headlights illuminating the drifting snow, but the driver was nowhere to be found. Maura Murray was a 21-year-old nursing student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Bright, athletic, and fiercely driven, she possessed a quiet intensity that masked a growing internal pressure. Before transferring to study nursing, she had attended the prestigious United States Military Academy at West Point, an environment that demanded absolute perfection. To her family and peers, the young woman was a high achiever with a promising future, a former track star who pushed herself to the limit. Yet, the days preceding her journey north were marked by a series of inexplicable decisions, forming a puzzle that investigators have struggled to assemble for 2 decades. The North Country of New Hampshire is a region defined by its isolation and rugged independence. Communities like Woodsville exist on the periphery of the vast White Mountain National Forest, a sprawling wilderness of granite peaks and deep, shadowed valleys. Decades ago, these were bustling hubs fueled by the timber trade and railroad expansion, but a slow rural exodus left behind a profound stillness. The locals possess a stoic resilience, accustomed to harsh winters and the unforgiving nature of the landscape. In these tight-knit enclaves, strangers are noticed, and secrets are rarely kept for long. Shortly after 7 in the evening, a resident of a nearby farmhouse heard the unmistakable sound of a collision. Looking out the window, they observed a dark Saturn sedan resting against the snowbank on the sharp curve of Route 112. A few minutes later, a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood passed the scene. He stopped to offer assistance, finding a young woman standing near the damaged car. She assured him that she had called roadside assistance and pleaded with him not to contact the police. Knowing that cellular reception in that remote stretch was virtually non-existent, Atwood drove a short distance to his home and dialed the authorities. The Grafton County Sheriff's Department dispatched an officer to the scene. According to the official police reports, the first responder arrived at the weathered curve at 7:46. The blue lights of the cruiser swept across the snow, revealing the abandoned Saturn. The doors were locked, the windshield was cracked, and the driver had vanished. The window of opportunity was impossibly narrow. Between the moment the bus driver departed and the arrival of law enforcement, a mere 7 to 9 minutes had elapsed. In that brief span of time, a young woman evaporated from the face of the earth. The sheer physics of the vanishing defied logic. There were no footprints leading into the deep snow of the surrounding woods, no signs of a struggle on the icy pavement, and no passing vehicles reported by the few residents who lived along that desolate stretch. A search of the abandoned vehicle yielded a perplexing inventory. Investigators discovered a deployed airbag, a box of wine that had spilled across the interior, and printed directions for Burlington, Vermont, and the Berkshires. Strangely missing were her debit card, credit cards, and cellular phone. The items left behind painted a portrait of a hasty departure, yet the absence of a clear destination only deepened the enigma. The mystery of her presence in Woodsville began days earlier on the Amherst campus. On the Thursday before the crash, she had suffered a sudden emotional breakdown while working at a security desk, crying inconsolably but refusing to explain the cause to her supervisor. By Monday afternoon, she had emailed her professors and employer, falsely claiming a death in the family to excuse a week-long absence. The state of her dorm room painted a haunting picture. The art had been taken off the walls, and her belongings were packed into neat boxes, with a printed email regarding the fabricated family tragedy resting on top. She withdrew $280 from an ATM, purchased alcohol, and drove north. The psychological weight of that solitary drive into the fading light of a winter afternoon is difficult to fathom. Leaving behind the structured world of academia, she ventured into a landscape where the towering pines cast long, suffocating shadows. The White Mountains offer a profound sense of anonymity, a place where one can easily disappear by choice or fall victim to the unforgiving elements. The temperature that evening hovered near freezing, and the encroaching darkness would have amplified the profound isolation of the rural highway. By the following morning, the reality of the situation had triggered a massive response. New Hampshire Fish and Game, state police, and local volunteers descended upon the area. Search lines combed the dense woods flanking Route 112, navigating treacherous ravines and the icy banks of the nearby Amonoosuc River. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the freezing terrain from above, looking for any heat signature in the desolate wilderness. Scent-tracking dogs were deployed, tracing a path from the Saturn eastward down the highway. The canine search provided a chilling detail. The dogs followed her scent for roughly 100 yards down the asphalt before abruptly losing the trail in the middle of the road. This sudden cessation strongly suggested a terrifying possibility. She had not wandered into the treacherous timberland to succumb to the elements. Instead, the evidence pointed toward her entering a vehicle, either as a willing passenger seeking refuge from the cold or as the victim of a predatory encounter. The realization that a predator might have been hunting on their quiet roads sent a tremor through the North Country. Woodsville, a community where doors were routinely left unlocked, suddenly felt vulnerable. The residents looked at passing cars with newfound suspicion, and the desolate stretches of highway transformed from familiar landscapes into corridors of potential danger. The silence of the forest was no longer peaceful. It felt complicit. For the Murray family, the agonizing uncertainty became a permanent state of existence. Her father, Fred, relentlessly paced the rural roads, knocking on doors and pleading for information. The family established command centers, distributed thousands of flyers, and organized independent searches when official efforts scaled back. Their desperate quest for answers collided with the bureaucratic realities of a multi-agency investigation, leading to enduring frustrations over the handling of the cold case. As months bled into years, the vacuum of concrete evidence was filled by a torrent of speculation. Local legends intertwined with internet sleuthing, generating theories that ranged from a meticulously planned escape to start a new life to a fatal encounter with a local resident whose dark secrets were protected by the tight-knit community. Rumors circulated about an A-frame house not far from the crash site, where whispers suggested a violent altercation had taken place. Some believed in a tandem driver, an unknown accomplice who had followed her north and whisked her away from the crash site before the police cruiser ever crested the hill. This region of New England has a long, unsettling history of swallowing people whole. The vastness of the White Mountain National Forest, spanning hundreds of thousands of acres, is a labyrinth of treacherous ravines and uncharted logging roads. Historically, those who wandered off the beaten path often became tragic footnotes in local lore. The terrain is an impartial adversary, indifferent to the desperate searches of law enforcement or the agonizing grief of a shattered family. The investigation was plagued by tantalizing but ultimately fruitless leads. A rusted knife found in a nearby cabin, a disturbed patch of earth in a basement, a cryptic video posted anonymously online. Each new discovery reignited hope, only to be extinguished by forensic testing or airtight alibis. Law enforcement interviewed hundreds of individuals, designated persons of interest, and convened grand juries, yet the threshold of definitive proof remained agonizingly out of reach. The complexity of the case was compounded by the crossing of state lines. The journey originated in Massachusetts and ended in New Hampshire, creating a fragmented trail of evidence. The initial classification of the incident as a standard missing person case rather than a criminal investigation resulted in the loss of precious time and potentially crucial forensic data from the crash scene. The chain of custody for the narrative itself became tangled in a web of jurisdictional boundaries. Today, the sharp curve on Route 112 remains a haunting monument to the inexplicable. A blue ribbon, weathered by countless New Hampshire winters, is tied to a tree near the site where the Saturn came to rest. It serves as a silent vigil for a young woman whose life was suspended in the span of 7 minutes. The road continues to wind through the White Mountains, indifferent to the tragedy it witnessed, while the surrounding timberland keeps its secrets buried beneath the snow. The tragedy of February 2004 transcends the facts of a police procedural. It taps into a primal fear of the unknown, the terrifying reality that a person can step out of their life and vanish into the ether, leaving behind nothing but a locked car and a chorus of unanswered questions. The quiet life outside the main street of Woodsville still fuels whispered theories, but the truth remains locked in the freezing darkness of that winter night. What compelled her to leave the safety of her campus and drive into the remote wilderness? Did she seek a brief respite from the crushing pressures of her life, or was she running toward an unknown destination? If she entered a passing vehicle, who was the driver that emerged from the shadows of the White Mountains, only to disappear back into them with a desperate passenger? The disappearance of Maura Murray remains one of the most perplexing mysteries in modern American history. It is a story of a fractured timeline, a desolate highway, and a community forever altered by a fleeting moment of tragedy. As the wind howls through the granite peaks of the North Country, it carries the echo of a profound absence, a chilling reminder that some roads lead only to the unknown.